welcome to another episode of Twice Told Tales podcast. With us today is returning guest Dan Kovalik, here to discuss the continuing spiral of the world downhill. So, welcome, Dan. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm okay. I'm personally fine. Yeah, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, but I'm surviving. So, good to see you both.
Oh, it's great to see you too.
Good to have you. Thanks for accepting our invitation again.
Of course, my pleasure.
So I thought we'd start off with an interesting video that Satara brought my attention to, which is posted on our Telegram channel, where it's Benjamin Netanyahu, I think it was in 2002, right before the invasion of Iraq, trying to sell the invasion of Iraq to Congress. And in which he let slip that the idea of subverting Iranian culture, the Iranian state, by simply playing fictional American television programs like 90210 that show glamorous American lifestyles to the Iranian youth. And I just thought, with your travels in the Muslim world, what you think of that, and with 20 years since, have you seen any of that in your travels, and just what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first, let's just say that with friends like Netanyahu, you don't need enemies. I mean, he has led us down the primrose path so many times, including, I guess he was very instrumental in leading the U.S. into the war with Iraq, which, was devastating, and obviously, especially for the Iraqis. In terms of, his, claim that the West could, again, use its cultural force to lure people away from the Islamic Revolution. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I think, look, obviously, culture has a lot of power. I think if we go back to the Soviet Union, I do think that, in a lot of ways, the Soviet people sold their soul for blue jeans and rock and roll. There's that incredible. Have you ever seen the Gorbachev commercial? He did a commercial for Pizza Hut, and in the commercial, he basically says that he brought Pizza Hut to the Russian people. That he sold socialism for Pizza Hut. So I think you can't be so quick to dismiss the power of Hollywood. And I'll tell you that almost every person I know who've learned English as a second language, they learned it by watching the show Friends. So these things,
I didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to let you know.
You're one of the exceptions. So I think there is a power to it. I think that I can't underestimate that. I think people do, when they see these movies, they see these shows, they do think that the U.S. is like paved with gold. They don't realize how hard it is to live in the U.S., how expensive it is, how many problems there is with crime, homelessness, poverty. And so they want the life they do see in these movies and these shows. I do think, he's got a point there. I think it's worked. It did work with the Soviet Union, I think, in a big way. Keith Richards once said that, he helped bring the Berlin Wall down, with the Rolling Stones. And there's some truth to that, And I'm a big Stones fan, so but I have mixed feelings about the fact that, yeah, they probably did do that. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
How about you, Satara, since you're the one who remembered that video?
Well, I think it's very important to observe how, while at the same time we're confronting Zionists and U.S. imperialist ambitions on the war fronts, there is another ongoing war against local cultures and lifestyles that plays a very, very important role in turning a population against their elected leaders. That's how military coups also become more efficient. If the population has developed a mentality that doesn't like whatever it's used to consider part of their identity, when they become or they develop this self hatred for whatever belongs to their culture and their identity, it's a lot easier to make them revolt against their governments and to go on with the imperialist agenda, and just they basically become the enemy country's troops inside their houses. And I think at the same time that Iran is trying very hard to, and has been very powerful, coming from Iran, I'm saying that in confronting U.S. And Israel with developing missiles and other forms of self-defense, we are. I think the threat of the cultural war is very serious, and I think. I don't know. I mean, I don't think we're doing enough. Sometimes it's talking to my students and seeing the younger generation. There's like, of course, the Iranian society, like any other society, is not a monolith, and you can see both sides or several different currents at the same time. But one dangerous one is that people are becoming indifferent to the struggle of, for example, Iraqis or Palestinians or Syrians, because they think that's foreign to them, while they're the closest to them. And the same thing that happened to Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya could happen to Iran too. And we just share more with our neighbors than with the Americans probably, and how the Iranian identity and the Muslim identity are integral to our sovereignty and our strengths. So that's why I think that video, that speech by Netanyahu, is a confession, and that Iranians need to, or other people in the region also need to pay attention to. But we have to take that war as serious as we take the military war and attacks against our sovereignty serious.
Yeah, I would say like my experience talking to young people in Iran also just underscored some very depressing internalization of propaganda narratives. And one of them is seeing the idea of contributing to the resistance, contributing to the fight in Gaza or Lebanon, instead of seeing it as a blessing, seeing it as a curse, and seeing it as something that, whoa, why should we be burdened by this? Let them fight their fights. We don't need to participate in that. And it's so defeatist, and obviously coming from the West, because a Shia, culture that is rooted in the idea of self-sacrifice for justice should not be producing youths with that mentality. And it's very sad. And it's also very wrong, because every time you see the Iranian missiles fly, you can see them as the most popular country in the world. It's a great investment in terms of global leadership when you take on fanatical evil. And another good example of defeatist propaganda that Dan and I were just talking about before we started is what we're seeing coming out of Syria. So I just turn it over to you, Dan, and tell us what your thoughts are on Syria right now. And then I'd like to hear Satara's analysis, who's been following more the media, the Farsi language media, so we can have a little comparison of what we've been hearing.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm worried. I've been to Syria twice. And first of all, I want to say that along with the cultural war in which the West tries to sell its modern or even postmodern culture to the world, at the same time, what it's doing, and we see this in places like Syria, is destroying the old world, an old culture, literally physically destroying it, right?
Absolutely.
Destroying antiquities, ancient ruins, churches, mosques, right? Syria is the best example of this. During the Syrian war, you had that famous scene where the guy I think in Palmyra, who was,
Yep.
died protecting ancient antiquities. So I think, first of all, what's happening in Syria goes along with the culture war, where the West is destroying old culture, even its own, right? Even old Roman culture, like in both in Syria and Lebanon, which we've seen in Tyre, in Baalbek. And that's what makes the march of these terrorists, and that's what they are in Syria, quite concerning, because they are putting literally the civilization of Syria at risk. So with that said, what's happening? As far as I know, it does seem the terrorists have taken over Aleppo, the ancient city of Aleppo, which has stood as a continuous city for 7,000 years. I think it's one of the oldest, continuous cities in the world. Apparently they have, come close to taking over Hama, although apparently that's now being contested both by the Syrian army and, I guess, Hezbollah. I just saw that Hezbollah has entered the city of Hama to protect it. But, things moved very quickly. It is disturbing that the Syrian, Iranian, and Russian intelligence did not nip this in the bud. How could they have not seen this coming?
True.
Because now that they've taken over a city of 2 million people in Aleppo, it could take years to get them out. And there'll be more damage to the infrastructure and the old antiquities
They'll force
in
Syria
doing it.
own cities, right? It forces Syria to destroy its own.
No, exactly. Yeah. And that's what happened before. I've been to those cities. I've been to Duma, where because of the battles, the pitched battles, this city was just brought down. The biggest Palestinian refugee camp in the world outside Damascus I've been to. Same thing happened. City was just leveled by both sides, in house-to-house battles. And strangely enough, Hamas, remember, joined the terrorist side, which was a terrible decision. They've now apologized for that, but my goodness.
Yeah, that's the Muslim Brotherhood influence. People don't quite understand that, but that's an interesting aspect of the Syria-Palestine dynamic.
So look, I'm very worried, because it felt like for a moment that the resistance had the upper hand. It felt like Hezbollah was winning against Israel. It felt like Iran, was able to deliver really serious blows to Israel. It felt like momentum was starting to be on the side of the resistance. And then this ceasefire came in Lebanon. I understand why Hezbollah needed that. They were, I think, winning, but they were in bad shape, right? Their leadership had been killed. I think that they had suffered great losses, needed some time and opportunity to rearm. And that's, of course, why the terrorists were kind of engaged in Syria, to prevent Iran from being able to rearm Hezbollah through Syria. I think that was a big reason why that's happened. But Israel and the United States, with the help of Turkey, the timing of this couldn't have been better for them. They now have Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, who should be focused in other theaters, now starting to have to focus on Syria. On re-winning a war they already won.
Right.
So it's very, it cannot be seen as a good thing. It's a very bad thing, whether the bleeding can be staunched. I hope it can, but it's not a good situation. And again, who's left holding the bag? The Palestinians. Now they're back in Gaza fighting alone.
The media also shifts, so the population is less hysterical about Palestine now, and so
Exactly.
the global population.
Yeah. No, it's terrible. I try to find hope in things, and I'm not giving up hope, but I'm, these are dark days. These are very dark days.
Very dark days. That's true.
Yeah.
But that's it's a perfect.
Go ahead.
It's a perfect scenario for diverting the world's attention and the resistance attention from Palestine and Gaza to Syria, as you said. I think one of the reason that Hezbollah had to or accepted the ceasefire is not only because they needed a time to rearm and recover after they lost two important leaders, but it's also because how fraction and partition the Lebanese society is. You have the Sunnis and the Christians and the Druzzis and others, and not everyone, unfortunately, supports Hezbollah in its fight against Zionism. And so Hezbollah, I think Hezbollah is very smart in observing those the public opinion of those fractions of the society, and the Lebanese government is failing to support Hezbollah the way they had to. So I believe that's another reason that they're doing it. And talking about Syria. And how the cities are, or it looks like the cities are falling into the hands of these terrorists. Muslim Brotherhood, as you said, played a role in support or supporting the terrorists against the Assad governments. And I see this conversation online how there are a lot of people who support Palestine, or at least they claim that they support Palestine, but they hate the Assad government, as if they do not understand that whatever or whoever Assad is, at this point, Assad's enemy and the enemy of the Palestinians are exactly the same, and it's the Israeli government. And why do you think that people are even after everything that happened since 2011? Why are there still people who do not understand that while the genocide is going on in Palestine, they're still so concerned about whether Assad is ruling Syria or not? Why are they not understanding that everything that is being done against Syrian sovereignty and independence, at this time led by Assad, is going to turn against Palestinians? It's like they haven't learned their lessons yet.
Yeah, well, I think because of the very effective vilification of Assad over many years, which, they did the same thing to Gaddafi. That's why there was very little, you didn't hear a peep of opposition amongst the peace groups in the West, amongst very few people. Did you hear any opposition to what happened in Libya?
Exactly.
Because Gaddafi, since I was a child, was portrayed as a monster.
Yep.
And the same thing now with Assad. What can you say about Assad? He, I guess, just recently he was told, that he could have peace if he just stopped helping the resistance and the Palestinians, and he refused. He has to be given some credit for that. But again, he's been so vilified, and it's to the point where most people cannot go back on that, right? They have this, and I think it's very orchestrated. Here, I'll just give it, in little Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I live, we have a Palestine, solidarity group, or groups now. We had one, but it's now been fractured because there are people who insist on bad-mouthing Syria and Iran and being against the resistance somehow, being against Hezbollah, which again seems insane. But some claim to be Syrians whose families were killed during the war. And I say claim because I don't know who they are. But the point is, I think in every city of the U.S. there's people like that. I think some are probably being paid by intelligence to divide the peace movement, to divide the Palestinian solidarity movement. It's very effective. So this is well orchestrated, and I think we're not as good at propaganda as they are. Let me say something too. I mean, the other reason why the West gets the upper hand all the time is because it has no limits. It has no moral or legal limits.
Hmm.
So, for example, you look at Hezbollah, you look at Iran, how did they respond to Israel's attacks? They almost entirely focused on attacking Israeli military targets. I don't think Iran killed one person in the, 3 strikes it made against Israel. And as you say, Hezbollah cares about its own Lebanese people. It's not willing to allow Lebanon to be totally sacrificed for its struggle. Israel and the United States and its Western allies have no limits. They are murdering, they are raping, they are breaking every treaty that they agree to. It's very hard to counter that type of evil if you are willing to put moral limits on yourself. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, but you can see why the resistance is at a great disadvantage.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And people need to see that. People, I mean, even look at Syria. For what all you say about Assad, any other government would have leveled Idlib a long time ago. They would have just carpet bombed Idlib, right? Idlib would be just wiped off the map. But he's allowed that to exist and continue to be an incubator, a petri dish for terrorists, right? So Assad has limits. But again, the West has no limits. And we're seeing that in Gaza. They have made a point in Gaza to show us they have no limits. What they are doing to children, to women, it's just unbelievable, right? And the resistance won't go there. Thank God for that. But what it means is they're at a great disadvantage. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that. But
well, the Iranians have a very good name for that. The West, the U.S., the Great Satan. I think it's.
Yeah. I mean, it is the Great Satan. I'm sorry, I live here. It's my country, and it is the Great Satan. I mean, it took me a while in my life to come to that conclusion. Though I came to it pretty young in life, and I came to it by seeing what the U.S. was doing in Central America, very close to me. Murdering thousands of people, very poor people, defenseless people, supporting desk. No, go ahead.
That's correct.
Priests in Central America. Yeah. I mean, they murdered whole Christian churches and communities. It was U.S. trained rebels gunning down grandmas in a cathedral.
Oh yeah, archbishops. They killed a saint, Saint Oscar Romero. He's now a saint. They murdered him. I mean, it's unbelievable what they did. As Chomsky pointed out, in Central America, you could only describe the way, the methods of the death squads the U.S. supported is satanic.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh yeah.
That's an interesting quote from Chomsky.
Even Chomsky.
Well, because they were engaged in ritual killings, and that's what Israel's doing too. I mean, it is satanic what is happening.
Yeah,
I don't use that lightly, but well, I guess that leads us to the Great Satan, right? I guess that's why I said it. Yeah, I mean, and I won't get into the details, but you could read some of Chomsky's details about what they did in El Salvador and what they did in Guatemala.
That's what started Chris' career too. He was down there, and so I think a lot of people during that period woke up to the ultimate brutality of U.S. empire.
Yeah, when I was
and
19,
how the Salvador option became a policy.
Yes, Exactly. But even the Salvador option was really the Vietnam option. That was borrowed from Vietnam. I mean, we've been doing this a long, long time.
Yeah.
You know, if you look, look at what the U.S. did in Vietnam, where rape was considered standard operating procedure. I mean, there's a great film called Vietnam and American Holocaust, narrated by Martin Sheen, and that's based on these Winter Soldier hearings held. And the soldiers were collecting ears for beers. If you got a Vietnam ear, you got a beer. And if you raped a Vietnamese woman, you were a double veteran.
Wow.
And you can go back to Korea, same stuff. I mean, this has been going on forever. The Philippines too, at the beginning of the 20th century. So the U.S. is the great Satan, and how it has been able to portray itself as some savior of democracy and freedom is a joke. It's a horrible joke.
Isn't that what the religious texts tell us about Satan? Is that he's the great trickster, and he comes?
He is the prince of lies, and the United States is the prince of lies. And that goes back to the Netanyahu thing about using culture to trick people, and so we are dealing with great evil. I mean, I don't mean to depress people or get hyperbolic, but we are facing an amazing evil. And again, when you see these videos coming out of Gaza, it's very clear this is an evil that, needs to be fought with every fiber of our body. And, because what they're showing too in Gaza, they're trying to make a point. They are really trying to say, we can do this to people. And if we can do it to these people, we can do it to you, right? I mean, they want to destroy every legal and moral barrier to mass murdering people and torturing people. So, the need to resist this is just so important.
Well, let's try and wrap this up on a happy note.
Yeah, sorry.
Or it comes to my mind. So, what's your thought on the idea of this great evil, which I fully agree with everything you said? Like the rationality or the self-destructiveness of is it a self-destructive force? Like, could this psychotic evil lose control of preserving its own self and lead us all into some thermonuclear war? Because it seems very close to that. Or do you think that narrative is being ginned up as a way of controlling the global population and keeping it in a state of fear? What's your thought on that? And both of you.
Well, I believe that there are people in the ruling class of the West that are completely nihilistic and are willing to blow up the world. And why? Or one might say, well, that's crazy. They'll be blown up too. See, they don't believe that. I think one of the most important symbolic acts was during the height of COVID, when everyone was locked in their houses. Those three rich guys separately went into space, right?
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos, right? Richard Branson, and was it Elon Musk? They showed, hey, you poor bastards, you're stuck in your houses. We're going to space. And I think that is the message, and that they believe they're going to escape all this. They got an escape plan. Either they're going to space, they're going to live in bunkers, whatever it is. They think they will be immune from the destruction of the world. In fact, I saw Elon Musk several months ago. He unveiled this blueprint of a plane that he was hoping to create, this giant plane that with solar power could revolve around the world for like 5 years without ever landing. And it would even have a giant swimming pool. You can see a video of this. They think that's what they can do. They really, that, and it doesn't matter if they're right or they're wrong, that they can do that. They believe they can do that. And so I do think they're willing to risk the rest of us being destroyed. I mean, that's, I think it's a real possibility. That's what makes them so dangerous.
Reminds me of the movie Don't Look Up. Have you watched that?
I have not seen it yet. Should I watch that?
Well,
I mean, it's kind of
propaganda. Yeah.
It is propaganda, but it has the same idea of how like the rulers are going to destroy the earth, and they feel, which is ridiculous, but they feel that they will be saved by traveling to space. But it shows that mentality exists among the elites, the so-called
I think
elites.
it does. I think it does. Even there was a editorial in the Huffington Post. I don't know if you know the Huffington Post, pretty liberal, now online thing. An editorial saying, "Hey, a little nuclear war would be good because it would help with global warming because there'd be a nuclear winter." So there's people thinking this way. I mean, there are people thinking this way.
Well, I mean, if
You
you see
know,
the psychology of like Malthusianism that was ever present in the COVID narrative, it 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 wouldn't surprise me that some people in elite circles have convinced themselves that if they can't figure out a biological way of reducing the population, that the nuclear war might be the next best thing. So I'm a little bit concerned with that because there is a strong Malthusian vein in the ruling class, and so I'm afraid of that too. I also recognize that there is a strong, and it has been, since the 50s, or a strong use of the threat of nuclear war to create social realities in the U.S. So I'm equally as concerned that this might be just, and it may be the fact that the ruling class here realizes that, and so they overplay their cards. They overplay the use of the threat of nuclear war until the point we actually have nuclear war. So, because I think Russia isn't fooling around.
right.
You've been to Russia a few times recently, and when I say Russia, I mean the east of Syria. The east of Ukraine. Can you tell us a little bit of your thoughts on the Russia-U.S. tensions as it relates to eastern Ukraine?
Yeah, well, Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of the UK, has very recently admitted that this is a proxy war against Russia. I mean, this is a war between the West and Russia, between the collective West and Russia. Russia sees it that way. The people of the Donbass in what was eastern Ukraine see it that way. And it is that way. That's what it is. And now the war in Syria is that too. So, because Russia's there too now. And I do think part of the goal of activating the terrorists in Syria is also to try to attack Russia. So this is a world war we're seeing. It is not, on the level of a World War II or World War I yet, but we're really quickly moving in that direction. And again, the people in eastern Ukraine, particularly Donetsk and Luhansk, I mean, they're very painfully aware of that. And that's why they were willing to join Russia. I mean, I think they see Russia as, protecting them from that, and protecting the world from fascism. They see this as a continuation of the war against fascism in World War II. And I think that's true. I mean, we really are. The struggle we're in right now is a titanic struggle against the forces who want to save humanity and civilization, and those who seem to be bent on destroying it.
Do you think, talking about how the West is also fighting Russia in Syria, there are talks that it might be US's plan to reach a deal with Russia to make Russia withdraw from Syria in return for the US and NATO withdrawing from Ukraine? Do you think that's something that Russia would agree to?
First of all, I think that probably is a gambit. I think what we're seeing is, in advance of Trump coming to power, attempts right now for the West to increase its bargaining power. So, and I thought about exactly what you're saying. Will they say, oh, you can have the Donbass in Ukraine and win that war, but get out of Syria, abandon the Palestinians? Sure, I think that will be offered. Now, your question is, will Russia take that deal? I don't know. I think they've invested so much blood and treasure in Syria. I don't think they're going to be excited to do that. I certainly don't think they'll abandon Syria to the terrorists. I don't think that deal they'll accept. I don't know. I don't know. I can only say I hope not. I mean, that would just, if they abandon Syria, it would mean abandoning also the Palestinian people. So let's pray they don't do that.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Well, I think unless is there anything you would like to tell people about, or any books or things that you currently have?
Yeah.
Tell us about your latest book. Yeah.
I have The Case for Palestine, Why It Matters, Why You Should Care. Check it out. People seem to like it. And I'm heading to Beirut next week. I feel I need to at least be with the people in the Levant and show my solidarity. So follow me on Twitter at Daniel M. Kovalik, and I'll be posting some videos from Lebanon.
We'll put the link to your Twitter account in the caption so people can easily access that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, should we wrap it up? Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
No, I just want to thank you for giving me your time and having me on your show. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Oh, thank you for.
Hopefully, we can hear a report from Lebanon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Thank you. I thought we had a very good discussion, by the way. I'm very happy about it. So
it's fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
All right, you can wrap up.
Okay. Thanks everyone for watching us. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share the video if you liked it too.